So in the previous lecture video, we solved some numerical problems, and we also had a look at the phasor representation of the impedance, and certain things were interpreted from that phasor representation. Now we continue with our discussion, and we discuss using the same phasor representation. We discuss a little bit more on power and impedance. Of course, impedance we have already discussed, so we discuss a little bit more on impedance, and we also discuss something on power, the power that is carried by the transmission line. So we know that ES is equal to IR ZR plus R naught by 2 e raised to j beta s plus k e raised to minus j beta s. Now we can take e raised to j beta s outside as we did earlier. E raised to j beta s comes out 1 plus k e raised to j 5 minus 2 beta s. So all these things we had, these type of manipulations we had done earlier when we discussed the phasor representation of impedance. Now, of course, divided by 2. Similarly, the current at any point on the transmission line can be expressed as by 2R naught 1 minus magnitude K. You have the current expression earlier. I just have manipulated it the same way as I did the voltage expression. 5 minus 2 beta s. Now ZR is complex in general, which means that this as a whole will have a phase term, say e raised to j theta. And this is also the same term as you have here. This is ZR is the load impedance, which can be complex in general. So e raised to j theta will be its phase also, which means that if you look at the phase part of this as well as this, the phase part is the same. Now the phase part being the same, we can neglect them and proceed with a phasor representation of voltage as well as current using only these two. Because voltage is proportional to this, current is proportional to this. This is a phase which is common for both voltage and current. So if I just drop this, it's not going to affect because the relative position between voltage and current is not going to change. Because if at all there is a rotation created on the phasor diagram because of these angles, the phase angles here, that is going to be the same for both voltage and current, and hence, as I said, the relative position of these phasors, voltage and current phasors, will not change. So what we'll do is we will take only these two as representatives of voltage and current respectively and plot the phasor diagram. Okay, so now the phasor diagram, when we plot the phasor diagram, we have plotted this for the impedance. It's the same thing actually that we plot, but we interpret it in a different way. The voltage will be proportional to 1 plus magnitude K e raised to j 5 minus 2 beta s, and the current is proportional to 1 minus magnitude K e raised to j 5 minus 2 beta s. So this is what we plot, and as I discussed a short while ago, e raised to j beta s and the phase associated with the other terms that you have along with this expression for ES and IS is left out because it is going to be the same phase for ES and IS. That contribution from that is going to be the same for ES and IS. So as we did with the discussion on impedance, the phasor diagram is this. say this is 1, this is 1, the one that you have here, this is the one that I have shown here. Phase of 1 is 0, of course, and this is k, and this will be phi minus 2 beta s, phi minus 2 beta s, and 1 plus k phi minus 2 beta s will be this. We had plotted this earlier, so I can straight away plot it here. Now this becomes a representative of, this phasor is representing the voltage, and minus k will be like this, 180 degrees phase shifted from k e raised to j phi minus 2 beta s. If you shift it by 180 degrees, you get minus k raised to j phi minus 2 beta s. So this is that, and consequently this will be 1 minus k. So this becomes a phasor representation of current. Now you can see that if at all we had included the phase due to that ZR and the e raised to j beta s, the entire picture would have rotated. Of course, the real and imaginary axis would not have rotated, but the rest of it, everything would have got rotated, because everything is going to be multiplied by that phase. Everything is going to be acted upon by that phase. So everything gets rotated, and the relative position between voltage and current will not change. And hence we don't lose any information here by dropping that phase. It is in no way going to interpret what we are about to discuss. So now from this figure, from this phasor diagram rather, we have certain observations to make. Some of them may appear very straightforward, but still we discuss it for the sake of completeness. And remember that this phasor is representing the voltage, this phasor is representing the current. Now the first observation is that, so I'll write the observation here. First observation is that Emax occurs when phi minus 2 beta s is 2 pi times an integer. So this occurs when phi minus 2 beta s is 2 pi into an integer, which is quite obvious, because when phi minus 2 beta s, this angle is 2 pi into an integer, this k will be exactly in phase with 1, and 1 plus k will be this, as we saw earlier. So 1 plus k will be this, and that corresponds to the maximum amplitude the voltage wave can have. For all other values here, you can see that the voltage amplitude is not as much as it would be if phi minus 2 beta s is an integer times 2 pi. When it is in an integer times 2 pi, it is aligned with 1 and it gets added, you get the Emax, the maximum value for the voltage amplitude. And that we can write as IR. We have the expression ZR plus R0 magnitude, because we are talking of the amplitude of Emax, by 2, 1 plus k. This is what happens when phi minus 2 beta s is 2 pi integer. I put absolute value here because we talk about the magnitude. And as can be seen in the phasor diagram, this is what we discussed just now. This happens when k is aligned with 1 in terms of its phase. When k is aligned with 1, you have the maximum possible value. And for that to happen, we can say that the incident wave and reflected voltage wave have to be in phase. They have to be in phase. So when the incident and the reflected waves are in phase, at those points where they are in phase, the voltage waveforms will add up constructively. That is how we get this Emax. And if you look at the expression, for ES, the expression wherein we drop the other terms, if you look at the expression, you can see that this represents the incident. If you put the e raised to j beta s here, you have e raised to j beta s here, and you will have k magnitude e raised to j phi minus beta s. So that means you can write it as e raised to j beta s plus k e raised to j minus 2, e raised to minus j 2 beta s, where k is now magnitude k e raised to j phi. And when this incident and the reflected field are in phase, the two add up to give Emax. That is what we understand. And the next observation is that this is also somewhat obvious, especially in the light of what we discussed just now. The second observation is that Imax, maximum amplitude of the current waveform, also occurs when phi minus 2 beta s is pi, 3 pi, and so on. That means 2 times an integer plus 1 times pi. If phi minus 2 beta s is 2 times an integer plus 1 times pi, Imax occurs. And that is also quite obvious because this is the current phasor, and for the current phasor to have its maximum amplitude, for this phasor to have its maximum value, you see that this has to be aligned with this. This has to be aligned with this. That means minus k e raised to minus k e raised to j phi minus 2 beta s has to be aligned with this. And that happens when phi minus 2 beta s is pi. Say for example, phi minus 2 beta s is pi. If phi minus 2 beta s is pi, this phasor comes over here and this correspondingly moves here, and hence the current phasor will have its maximum value. So Imax occurs when phi minus 2 beta s is 2 times an integer plus 1 pi. And that value of Imax, maximum current amplitude, is given by, again we have the expression. If you flip back your pages of your notebook, you can see that expression is this. This is Imax. And this happens when phi minus 2 beta is pi, 3 pi, or in general 2 times an integer plus 1 times pi. So 2 times an integer plus 1 times pi. Now the third point, now that we have this results with us, these two observations. From these two observations, we make the next observation, which is actually a derivative of these three observations. This gives us the ratio Emax by Imax is equal to Emax expression you had earlier. I wrote the expression earlier. So if you recall, it is IR magnitude ZR plus R naught divided by 2. And Imax expression is IR magnitude of ZR plus R naught by 2 R naught and the rest of it. So if I divide Emax by Imax, I get R naught. Because Imax and Emax are same except for the R naught that you have here. So when you do Emax by Imax, you get R naught. Also, E min by I min is also equal to R naught. Now, why is it so? It's quite obvious. Why is it so? It is so because E min will be, or rather in terms of I min I can explain, I min will be identical to this, except for this will be 1 minus k. And E min will be identical to this without an R naught, and 1 plus k has equal to 1 minus k. And E min and I min occur when the incident and reflected waves, be it voltage or current, when the incident and reflected waves add up destructively. And for them to add up destructively, the incident and reflected waves have to be out of phase at that point where we have E min or I min. And as you can see, E min by I min also gives R naught. So if by some means, it's just an additional information, if by some means you have knowledge of Emax and Imax, if somehow you are able to measure Emax or Imax, Emax as well as Imax on the transmission line, and suppose or you are able to measure E min and I min, it is possible to find out what is the characteristic impedance of that particular transmission line. That's just an additional information. Now, moving on, the fourth. So first observation was regarding Emax, second was regarding Imax, and then the third one was a derivative of that, in the sense Emax by Imax gives R naught, and also E min by I min gives R naught. Now the fourth observation is that voltage maximum and current minimum occurs at the same location on the line. This is also interesting. Voltage max, that is Emax. Voltage max is the same as Emax. So voltage maximum as well as current minimum, I mean, occurs at the same location on the line. So from the phasor, we can easily understand this from the phasor. It is also intuitively correct. From the phasor, if you see, for voltage maximum to occur, phi minus 2 beta s has to be 0 or 2 pi or an integer times 2 pi. Right, so phi minus 2 beta is when phi minus 2 beta is 0 or 2 pi or an integer times 2 pi, as I said, you get the voltage maximum, because this phasor will end up taking its maximum value. And at that time, what happens is, this phasor, since this phasor is this k, this phi minus 2 beta is 0, it comes here. Correspondingly, this will come over here because it is the negative of this. This will come over here, and the current phasor will end up getting its minimum value of 1 minus magnitude k. So it all happens at the same value of s, wherein phi minus 2 beta s becomes an integer times 2 pi. So the point s where you have the voltage maximum will be the same point where you will have a current minimum. That is the next observation. And Emax by I min, Emax by I min will give us, remember Emax by I min is the maximum amplitude of voltage divided by the minimum amplitude of current waveform. Maximum amplitude of voltage waveform divided by the minimum amplitude of current waveform. That will be IR ZR plus R naught magnitude by 2 divided by IR ZR plus R naught magnitude by 2 R naught. Now Emax, the incident and reflected fields add up in phase. I min, they add up destructively. And what is this actually? This gives us IR ZR plus R naught, IR ZR plus R naught by 2. These things will cancel off and you will get R naught. And you will get R naught multiplied by 1 plus k divided by 1 minus magnitude k. And we recall this as the standing wave ratio, which means that this is equal to R naught S. And hence, at the point S where Emax is there, or in other words, at the point S where I min is there, the impedance, the line impedance will be R max, which is R naught into S. And it's again, you can see that it is R max, maximum line impedance, resistive of course, maximum line impedance is there at that point. And consequently, potential is maximum, current is minimum, because when the resistance increases, current decreases, and potential across that increases. So it's just to relate, just to see, just to give some intuitive input. R max, resistance is large, you have high potential difference there, and small current, I mean. Okay, so that is our interpretation. And of course, it is purely resistive. This part we had discussed earlier. It can also be interpreted from the phasor. If you just spend some time, you can see from the phasor that when this happens at the point where there is Emax and Imin, they are in phase, it's purely resistive. Both are in phase. So when both are in phase, you have a purely resistive impedance there. Likewise, now this I will not do. It is a continuation. It comes under this same interpretation. Voltage minimum, this I will not explain as much as I did here, because it is in a way it is a complementary. Voltage minimum, that is E minimum, and current maximum, they occur at the same point. They will occur at the same point on the transmission line. It is a complementary discussion of what we discussed just now, so I will not spend time on it. It occurs at the same point on the transmission line. Emin and Imax will be there, and Emin by Imax has to be R naught by S, which you can verify. R naught by S, which is equal to R min. And again, one can see that when the resistance is minimum, current is maximum, and potential across that resistance is low, minimum. Right? You can verify this result later. In the sense, E min by Imax is indeed R naught by S. It's a simple thing. You can do it later. And now we move on to the next observation, the fifth one. So the last observation was regarding the Emax by Imin and Emin by Imax. They occur at the same point on the transmission line, and they correspond to resistances R naught S and R naught by S, which is R max and R min respectively. Next one is regarding the power. Now power at a point of Emax. Now anyhow, we know the basic relation. I just write it down here. I square R, I V square by R. So power is equal to E square max by R max by using this. E square max by R max. So I'm finding out the power in a transmission line where I have Emax. So when I have Emax, at that point the resistance is R max and the power is E square max by R max. As you know, this is the relation I have here. E square max by R max. And the power at a point where resistance is minimum or the voltage waveform has its minimum amplitude is also P. These two will be the same powers because it is a lossless transmission line. The power remains the same throughout, and it is again intuitively a maximum in potential is compensated by a minimum in current, and a minimum in potential is compensated by a maximum in current, so power remains the same. That being the case, P square will be equal to, I just multiply these two, P square will be equal to E square max into E square minimum divided by R max into R min. R max into R min is R naught square. Because R max is R naught into S, R min is R naught by S. Which means that power is equal to Emax magnitude, because you take the positive square root. So just to emphasize that, I write here multiplied by Emin divided by R naught. This is the power on a transmission line. And since Emax is I min R naught S, Emax is I min R naught S and E min is I max R naught by S. By substituting it here, which you can do, you can show that power can also be expressed as R naught into I max magnitude, I min magnitude. So if you just substitute this, E max magnitude is I min magnitude R naught S, which we discussed in the previous observation, and E min is I max into R naught by S. So substitute it here, those S and all S will get cancelled, and you will have two R naughts, one of the R naught gets cancelled, and you get this as a result. So power is also equal to this. So again, if you have knowledge of Emax and E min, or I max and I min, as well as R naught of the transmission line, you can calculate the power which is flowing through the transmission line. That is our fifth observation. Now, interestingly, transmission line, so I just clean some space here for my next discussion. Interestingly, what happens is that a transmission line is made up of physical entities. So it could be copper or whatever it is. It is basically made up of physical entities which will have limitations in the sense. Most of the transmission lines will have a cap on Emax, the maximum voltage amplitude which it can carry. Most of the transmission lines will have this cap. So maybe if you cross this voltage amplitude, the dielectric may break down or whatever it is. Due to some reasons, you can have an Emax cap on a transmission line, which means that since the power carried by a transmission line is Emax magnitude E min divided by R naught, Emax is limited. Since Emax is limited and R naught is a constant of the transmission line, the power carried by a transmission line can be maximized only if E min is made equal to Emax. That is the only way you can make the power carried by a transmission line which has a cap on Emax, the maximum. And this can happen. Now Emax expression is something will be here, and then you will have 1 plus magnitude K, and E min magnitude is again the same thing will be here, and you will have 1 minus magnitude K. Now the only way you can make E min is equal to Emax is by making K equal to 0, or the reflection coefficient has to be made 0. You have to make K as equal to 0. That's the only way you can do it. You have to make K as equal to 0, and making K as equal to 0 implies, since K is given by ZR minus R naught by ZR plus R naught, K, this is K, this K can be 0 if ZR, K can be 0 if ZR is equal to R naught. That means there will be no reflection. K is 0 means there is no reflection, because K is basically the amplitude of the reflected waveform. So K will be 0. If K is 0, there will be no reflection. And for no reflection to happen, what it says is that the load impedance has to be equal to the characteristic impedance of the transmission line. And when that happens, there will be no reflection from the transmission line. So this is one among many reasons why we would like to have the load impedance equal to the characteristic impedance. Now this need not happen always, because the load impedance is determined by various other factors. The characteristic impedance is a property of the transmission line, and it is not a practical thing to fabricate or manufacture different transmission lines having different values of R naught so that it suits all kinds of loads. So we need to have some kind of a matching mechanism to ensure that the load impedance appears like the characteristic impedance to the transmission line. So we have made those observations and we have interpreted certain things from those 5 points which we discussed. Now we'll take an example. This is actually a derivation which I am just presenting here in the form of a problem statement. So the question is this. This is the question. In the arrangement below, I'll show that now. In the arrangement below, determine ZR. So this is the statement. So the arrangement is like this. There is a transmission line. So it continues here. There is a transmission line, and at the end of the line there is a load ZR. We have to determine what is ZR. So of course some of the data is not complete. So I will explain those missing points here when I discuss this. So we have to find out what is the, basically we have to find out what is the load impedance, or we have to get an expression which will help us find out what is the load impedance. Now we know that ZS, that is the impedance, the line impedance at a particular point S on the transmission line, is given by R0, ZR. These expressions were discussed in the previous video. JR0 tan beta S it is. So beta S I will write as 2 pi by lambda S divided by R0 plus J ZR tan 2 pi by lambda S. So we are aware of this relation. We are aware of this relation. Okay. So we are aware of this expression rather. So we are aware of this expression. Now let's say that the voltage amplitude, let's say we have access to measure the minimum and maximum of the voltage amplitude, let's say, and let's say that the voltage amplitude is like this. So I had explained earlier what we mean by this voltage amplitude. I remember that I explained even with a simulation. So let's say the voltage amplitude is like this. So this is at S0, this is the amplitude. It peaks somewhere here and then it drops to its minimum here. Let us say that the point on the transmission line where the voltage amplitude, so this is voltage amplitude, the point on the transmission line where the voltage amplitude has its first minimum when seen from the load side towards the source side. This is that point. Let that be, say, S dash, and let us say that we have access to this. Let's say that we have access to this and we have access to R0. We know R0, let us say, the characteristic impedance of this transmission line, and the first minimum of the voltage wave amplitude from the load side towards the source. Let's say we know this, we could measure this and we know R0. This is enough to, and of course lambda we should know because we are the ones who are sending the signal here and we know R0, so lambda can be determined. So if we know this R0 and lambda, it is possible to find out what is the load impedance ZR. So what we do is we note, in the previous, among the 5 points we had discussed that when S is equal to S dash, so I'll just write it here itself. When S is equal to S dash, we have ZS dash, which is the line impedance here. We discussed a short while ago in those 5 points, one of the observations we discussed is that when S is equal to S dash, that is the point where you have a voltage minimum, the line impedance will be R minimum and current will be I max. Of course, that is not relevant here. So at this point S dash, the resistance will be the impedance, the line impedance will be purely resistive, and it will be equal to R min, which is R naught by S, which is R naught by S. So if you can now rearrange, the terms here, if you can, so this basically what happens is this is equal to this. Now this is equal to this because Zs dash is R naught by S, as we discussed earlier, because that is the point where you have voltage minimum, and that is E minimum. So E min by I max was giving us R naught by S. So with this knowledge, what happens is R naught gets cancelled, and you just have to rearrange these terms to find out what is ZR, which you can do. So again, the steps involved are quite simple. S into this into 1, then just manipulate the terms here and there so that you get ZR, and the expression will be ZR equal to, verify the expression, R naught, spend 5 minutes and just do this, R naught 1 minus J S tan 2 pi S dash by lambda divided by S minus J tan 2 pi S dash by lambda. So if you know R naught, you know lambda, you know S dash, and of course standing wave ratio you can find out because you know the voltage maximum and minimum. With the information of all this, you can find out what is the load impedance. So using a transmission line, it is possible to find an unknown impedance. This is what this example tells us. Remember this method. So we saw one of the important reasons why the load impedance has to be equal to the characteristic impedance R naught in the case of high frequency approximation, or Z naught in general, in the previous discussion. Of course, before we discussed the way in which we could use a transmission line to find the value of an unknown impedance ZR. Okay. Before that, we discussed why we would like to have the load impedance as equal to, one of the important reasons why load impedance has to be equal to the characteristic impedance. Now, we continue further that discussion through this topic, reflection losses. Reflection losses on unmatched line. Line means transmission line. An unmatched line is one where ZR is not equal to R naught for high frequency, or ZR is not equal to Z naught in general. So an unmatched line is one where this is the case, and when this is the case, there will be reflection. So reflection losses, that's what we are going to discuss. What the reflection losses on unmatched line when ZR is not equal to R naught. That is the case of unmatched line. Okay. So we know that the power on the transmission line is E max E min by R naught. And this being the power on the transmission line, this will be the power delivered to load. This is the power which is delivered to the load. This is the power which is there throughout the transmission line, and this is the power which is delivered to the load. Now, we can write this as equal to, because we know E max is EI plus ER, that is when the magnitudes of the incident and reflected voltage waveforms add up in phase, we get E max. This was discussed a short while ago. And we get E min, that is the minimum value of the voltage waveform on the transmission line when the incident voltage waveform's amplitude and the reflected voltage waveform's amplitude are not in phase. divided by R naught. So we can write the power delivered to the load as equal to this, because it is E max E min by R naught. We write it like this: E max is this, E min is this. And this becomes equal to A plus B into A minus B. If you use that, it becomes equal to R naught. This is the power delivered to the load. This is the power delivered to the load. And this is equal to the difference between two powers. This is equal to difference between two powers. And this is the squared amplitude of the incident voltage waveform, and this is the squared amplitude of the reflected voltage waveform. And this is equal to the power delivered to the load. And this then becomes the power delivered to the load is equal to incident power minus reflected power. Incident power minus reflected power. So what happens is that there is some power incident onto the load and there is some power reflected from the load. It is the difference between these two that the load actually absorbs, and that is P. This is the power delivered to the load. Now, if you try to find out what percentage of the power is incident, or what percentage of power is delivered to the load out of the incident power, we end up getting 1 minus PR by Pi. And as you can see, if you are to have 100% here, PR has to be 0. If 100% of the incident power has to be delivered to the load, PR has to be 0. Also, we can write this as equal to 1 minus, because this is Pi and this is PR. Since this is Pi and this is PR, we can write this as 1 minus ER magnitude square by EI magnitude square. We can write it like this. Now, since S is equal to E max, this is the definition of standing wave ratio, which I remember having discussed earlier in one of the earlier videos. S is equal to E max by E min, which is equal to EI, incident voltage amplitude, plus reflected voltage amplitude, adding up in phase, divided by incident minus reflected. That gives E min. So E max by E min is the standing wave ratio. And now, if you use this relation, or rather from this relation, you can multiply S with this, and you will have S into this is equal to EI plus ER. And from that expression, you can find out that I will not waste time doing that here. It's a small exercise you can do on your own. This will be equal to, so you just have to multiply this with this, or multiply both sides with this, and then rearrange the terms to get the ratio ER by EI. And you can see that this becomes, please verify the results, it becomes S minus 1 by S plus 1. Which means that the ratio P by Pi can be written as 1 minus ER by EI is here. So it becomes S minus 1 square, because ER square by EI square is here, like this. And this again can be shown to be, I'll again not waste time, it's a simple high school level exercise. It can be shown to be 4S by S plus 1 square. So this is the ratio of the power absorbed by the load, or power delivered to the load, divided by, or the ratio between power absorbed by the load and the incident power. And as I said, ideally we would like this to be 1, and for this to be 1, you can see here that the standing wave ratio has to be 1. if S is equal to 1, it becomes 4 by 4, which is 1. And S becomes 1 when K is 0. You can see that from the expression for S in terms of K. When K is 0, S becomes 1. And for K to be 0, ZR has to be equal to R0. Now, just to complete the discussion, we can draw a plot where we have the standing wave ratio along the horizontal axis and P by Pi on the vertical axis. And this plot is actually has to be plot on a semi-log scale. So the smallest value S can take is 1, because you know S is Emax by Emin. When Emin is equal to Emax, the case when there is no reflection, S is equal to 1. And when Emin becomes smaller and smaller compared to Emax, that means there is a difference between Emax and Emin, which means that the reflection is becoming more and more significant. The value of S increases. So maybe somewhat like this on a logarithmic horizontal axis. And when S is equal to 1, as I said, P by Pi is 1. So 1 or 100 in terms of percentage. And since I put ratio, I'll put 1. And it just drops like this. And this is the rough sketch of how it is varying with respect to S, how the ratio between the power delivered to the load and the incident power varies with respect to S. This is how the picture looks like. Okay, now there are certain interesting observations which one can make about the input impedance of a transmission line for certain specific lengths. So I'll just write down the expression for the impedance, the line impedance at S. So if the transmission line is of length S, this is the input impedance as we have been discussing earlier on various occasions. So this being the input impedance of the transmission line of length S, the first case that we consider is, let's see what happens if S is equal to lambda by 8. That means the transmission line has a length which is equal to 1/8 the wavelength. So if the wavelength is 2 meters, for example, then the length of the transmission line is 2 meters by 8. That is 1/4 meter. Right. So let us see what happens to the input impedance of such a transmission line. So I will write like this, not necessarily that you have to write like this. So I will write Z lambda by 8 because S is lambda by 8, and you can see that this turns out to be ZR plus JR0 plus JR0 because tan 2 pi by lambda into lambda by 8 will give lambda cancels pi by 4. So tan pi by 4 is 1. So you get ZR plus JR0, and for the same reason, the tan in the denominator will also become 1, and we will end up getting the input impedance as given here. Now, if ZR is purely resistive, we can see that magnitude of input impedance of a transmission line whose length is 1/8 the wavelength is equal to, the magnitude is equal to R0. Because this, if you see, magnitude of these two are the same, it's only the phase that changes. So what happens is when you take the magnitude of this, you'll end up taking the magnitude of this, and the magnitude of this is equal to R0. So what we see is that a magnitude match is possible in that if the load resistance is purely resistive and is of value RR, some arbitrary value RR, then if the transmission line length is lambda by 8, then it is possible to have the magnitude of the input impedance of the transmission line the same as the characteristic impedance of the transmission line, of course at high frequency approximation, because we are using R0. So that is one observation that we make. So when Z is equal to lambda by 8, S is equal to lambda by 8, that is the length of the transmission line is lambda by 8. we call it as 1/8 transmission line, 1/8 wavelength transmission line for obvious reasons. 8th wavelength transmission line, more specifically. 8th wavelength transmission line means the length of the transmission line is lambda by 8, and this is what we see with regards to its input impedance. Now next we take the case of a quarter wavelength transmission line. That means the length of the transmission line is lambda by 4. So again, for example, if the transmission line is, and the wavelength of operation is 2 meters, then the length of the transmission line in this specific case, since it is lambda by 4, it will be 1 by 2. That is what we mean. So in that case, what happens is Z lambda by 4 will be equal to R naught. Now you can see what happens when S is lambda by 2. Now before we do that, it will be, because otherwise you will simply get infinity. So S is lambda by 2 means you will get tan pi, which is sin pi by, lambda by 4 means you will get tan pi by 2, which is sin pi by 2 by cos pi by 2, which shoots to infinity. So you can check that here. If S is equal to lambda by 4, you get pi by 2. So what we do is we know how to deal such cases from the experience we have gained by evaluating the limits. So we do like this. We rewrite the expression like this. Simply divide the numerator and denominator by tan 2 pi by lambda S plus J ZR. And now you can see what happens if S is equal to lambda by 4. If S is equal to lambda by 4, tan pi by 2 is sin pi by 2 by cos pi by 2, which is infinity. So this vanishes, J cancels off, and we are left with R naught square by ZR. So this is the input impedance of a transmission line of length lambda by 4, where ZR is its load impedance. Now what we see is that there are certain very interesting observations here. The first one is that, again, you can see it here happen. If ZR is large, of course R naught is fixed for a given transmission line. If ZR is huge, Z lambda by 4 becomes small. And on the other hand, if ZR is small, Z lambda by 4 becomes large. So in a way, this line inverts the resistance values, the impedance values. So if it is the output load impedance is high, means the input impedance appears to be low, and vice versa. So in the extreme, if ZR is equal to 0, that means if the transmission line is short circuited, ZR is 0 means load impedance is 0. Load impedance is 0 means it is short circuited. When the transmission line lambda by 4 transmission line is short circuited, we will have Z lambda by 4 as equal to infinity. Z lambda by 4 as equal to infinity. That means that when the lambda by 4 transmission line is short circuited, its input impedance looks like infinity. And this is sometimes called as a copper insulator. Copper insulator for obvious reasons, because its input impedance is infinite, and that's an insulator ideally. And an application of this is that if you have a transmission line, parallel wire transmission line, you can use a lambda by 4 line like this, lambda by 4. This is short circuited. You can use this as a support for this transmission line, because when you see from here, it has infinite impedance. This will not short the signals which are passing through this. So this is one particular application, and the same thing can be done for coaxial cable as well. So in the case of coaxial cable, so this is the parallel wire transmission line. You have the lambda by 4 line here, and this is shorted. Impedance looks infinity from here. And in the case of coaxial cable, this is the inner conductor. You can have a support like this, and this will be lambda by 4. So what happens is that it will, and of course this side will be shorted. So what you see is that the impedance here, this side, the impedance will be infinite. So it will be like an insulator supporting the transmission line. Okay, and then the next case is that B. A, we saw ZR is 0. B is the opposite. ZR is infinity. Of course, when ZR is infinity, when the transmission line is open circuited, the input impedance looks like 0. That is the second observation. And the third observation is that what happens if R0 square is somehow adjusted to be Z or Z lambda by 4. So this need not always happen. So let us just see what happens if this is indeed the case. This is what is going to happen. When R0 square is ZR by, when R0 square is ZR Z lambda by 4, what happens is that, of course, it implies R0 is square root of ZR Z lambda by 4. So what happens is, suppose, and remember this is something that we have artificially achieved, in the sense R0 is somehow, let's say, made equal to root of ZR Z lambda by 4, or the load impedance and Z lambda by 4 is such that its square root, the square root, its geometric mean is equal to R0. If this is indeed the case, what happens is that, suppose we have a case like this. There is a source, there is a signal source, and the source's internal impedance is, say, Z lambda by 4. We have a source with an internal impedance of Z lambda by 4, and we have a load which is ZR. We have a load which is ZR. We have a load which is equal to ZR. Now, since Z lambda by 4, the source internal impedance is fixed, the only way we can transfer maximum power from the source towards this load is to have some matching here, such that the impedance as seen from this side is equal to Z lambda by 4. And that can be achieved. The impedance as seen from this side is equal to Z lambda by 4, and that can be achieved if we choose a lambda by 4 line which has R0 equal to square root of ZR Z lambda by 4. We can achieve this matching if we have a lambda by 4 line connecting this source with internal impedance Z lambda by 4 to a load of impedance ZR, and if this lambda by 4 transmission line has its characteristic impedance equal to square root of ZR Z lambda by 4. Let's see why it is acting as a matching system, acting as a network which matches the impedance. So, if you see here, Z lambda by 4, the input impedance in general, the input impedance here, the input impedance is given by R0 square by ZR, and R0 square is equal to ZR Z lambda by 4 now. So this becomes Z lambda by 4. So you can see that the input impedance of a transmission line, when R0 is equal to square root of ZR Z lambda by 4, becomes equal to Z lambda by 4, which is such that there is a matching between this impedance, the source with this impedance, and the load which is ZR. So that is the application of a lambda by 4 line. Now the third case that we consider is lambda by 2. We'll solve an example regarding lambda by 4 later, then it becomes clearer. The third case that we consider is lambda by 2. That means the transmission line length is lambda by 2. Now what happens when the length of the transmission line is equal to lambda by 2? Z lambda by 2 becomes equal to R naught. You can substitute S as lambda by 2. You will get tan pi sin pi by cos pi, which is 0. So you will simply get ZR by R naught. Tan pi becomes 0. This is equal to ZR. So if you have a transmission line of length lambda by 2, then the input impedance of that transmission line will be the same as the load impedance, the impedance which is connected at the output of the transmission line. Now what is a possible application? Let us say we have let's say we have a source, signal source with ZR internal impedance, and we have a load which is ZR. Now it is perfectly matched, but let us say that the distance between the two is it's not very close to each other. It's not close to each other, let's say, physically close to each other. If it was close to each other, we could have just connected it and we would have had a perfect match. But let's say it is not close to each other and we need to have something to carry these signals from here to there. And in such cases, you can use a lambda by 2 transmission line here. You can use a lambda by 2 transmission line. And as seen here, its input impedance will be now exactly equal to ZR. So there will be a perfect match here. And hence there will be a maximum transfer of power. There will be no reflection, in other words. So this is the application of a lambda by 2 line. So in the next video, we will work out some examples wherein we will apply these concepts of a transmission line having length lambda by 4 as well as lambda by